Last question for today, to think about it until maybe we get together next week. Now, it may seem as though the answer to this is obvious and that we have already answered it today, but I ask you to take it with you. Is sin real? Is sin real? Are problems real, I could say. I could say it in a million different ways. Ask yourself that each and every time a negative thought comes into your mind, and allow the affirmation of what you do believe to override it. Because once we have let this one go, there aren't any more questions.
Yeah.
Good, Sam. Good.
Well, when I'm reading the book or books about the book, I'm always reading and writing. And sometimes, and recently, what's been happening is, as I'm writing, then a kind of like a new, different train of thoughts comes into my mind, and it's as though it's out of the flow of what I'm writing about.
Yeah. What are you wondering about, really, Sam?
The source.
And why is that important?
I don't trust my own mind and what it's doing.
That's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's only because you seem to come from a source you don't trust that you question what another source might be.
Yeah, that's it.
So does it help you trust the source that you call yourself?
I don't see it in a negative way. I see it as kind of a process.
Good. What I would encourage you about, Sam, is just to know that it's happening this way. Not to give you access to another source, but to help you trust the source that is yourself. You know, this information that we've been getting from Brother the last month about forgive and love the self you see, not the exalted self you think you need to be, but just the self you see right now, right in front of you today, the source that could be mad, could be fearful, could be anything. But learn to forgive and to trust. That's what we're being led to do. In fact, that's what this little piece is that I asked Linda to copy and hand out to everyone today. And I'd like to have us read it if you don't mind.
Heed this well, and do not underestimate the power of its simplicity.
I've never had him, ever, in 30 years, have I ever had him say, when in effect, to me, I interpret it as, now hear this. In other words, here is something you need. So don't mess this up.
When I ask you to forgive and love the self you now see, it is not for you to worry that this may be a flawed or worldly ego self. I am asking you to forgive the only one you have ever condemned and commit to loving the one you imagine that you hate.
Can you hear that? What I hear him saying in that is, you have never judged anybody but yourself. You have never failed to love anybody but yourself. So when you have accomplished this, you will have changed all of the rest.
You cannot now see the strength or value of this commitment as it relates to the ease with which the God Self can then share his vision with you. When you forgive and love whatever self you see, your love will show you only what is real about that self. You are now as God created you in perfect love. In being what it is, love recognizes itself and sees only what is part of it, with nothing asked or needed from your perception. Forgive and love the self you now see, and trust your God self to do the rest. You cannot fail now to find yourself, for here in this field of loving is the world reconciled with heaven, and you recognize you are already home. Heed this well, and do not underestimate the power of its simplicity.
What I feel is that if I once make this transition in my awareness, the awakening is done. The simple act of learning to love myself is what is going to open all of the, or expose all of the rest of the illusions, so to speak, that have occurred in my world. None of them will be able to withstand the scrutiny of loving myself and loving everything I see. How could it? If there was nothing in my perception that I didn't love, how could there be anything that would stand between me and you, or us and God? How could anything be there? But I've never really been able to bring myself to see the simplicity of what awakening to the truth really meant. Just that. Just being able to look at myself and say, you're a pretty lovable piece of work here. What would not fade away? What illusion would not fade away under that kind of scrutiny?
It seems that when you communicate like that, I love myself, it's the self communicating with the self, and the ego is just out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
I had another thing come through this morning. I'll try to share it next week or the week after. But it was exactly that, Roger. It was just the self that loves sees only love. And so when I commit to loving whatever I consider to be myself, everything then becomes a part of, or an experience, an expression of that love. Everything. There aren't any fears. There aren't any wars. There is no refugee problem. These are all symptoms that arise in our mind based on what our belief is now. And when that belief is gone, there's nothing to substantiate them. You see, that's what we can't believe. We still think that we are in a world instead of recognizing that the world is in us. And so we look and look and look and look for ways out here to see a different world, and it's never going to happen. What it must come down to then, in every case, is whether or not I am willing to love myself. Being able to truly accept when he says nothing real can be threatened. And nothing that we see in the world is real. There's nothing out there. The only thing that seems to exist in the world are the thoughts we had a moment ago. So why would we not want to open our mind to loving thoughts? That's all we're asked to do. Nothing more. You see, when each of us begins to love ourselves, the entire world changes. It's not just our world. It's not just what we see as who we as separated beings see, because we are not separate from the rest of God's Son. Everything changes. Everything is influenced by every thought of love. The sadness is when we don't allow ourselves to see it, but it is happening. I'm sure I shared this with you. One day one brother said, just sit for a moment and hold this loving thought. Hold this thought of well-being. We did, and afterwards he said, you never know the influence that that loving thought has everywhere in the world. He said there could be, for instance, a mother who was looking for a place to find food for a hungry child, and it came to her where to find that food. That was her experience of a loving thought. And that came because there was a loving thought available for her to find. We all can feel the difficulty that seems to arise when I look in the mirror and when I try to say I love you and nothing really seems to change. What are we expecting to change? Our perception? No. The only reason that it's difficult for any of us to say I love you is because we are expecting the ego's response to be positive to that. Stop doing that. When you say in a meditation, when you go within and you say, help me to see this loving self that I am, fully anticipate that you will be shown the creation of God. That's the self we're trying to see. And that self is not difficult to find. It's there. It is difficult for us to accept because we haven't had much experience accepting that self. We haven't had much experience accepting any of these beautiful selves. Look how often we judge and never once give thought to the fact that what we are judging is the perfect creation of God. So don't expect when you ask the ego to accept you that it will do so, because it won't. The ego is still that part of our mind, our God mind, that we have committed to not loving, to being doubtful that love exists. That's all it is. And we cannot anticipate or accept that our ego perception is going to be able to deal with that. It won't. And that's why God gave us the God self.
But I didn't look at him as though this is someone who doesn't love himself. But I still see this with him a little bit, that there's this
No,
not...
honey, that's not what you see. What you see is that in yourself. That's why whenever we are tempted to pray for someone, pray for yourself. Pray that you can see yourself in such a way that you know that what you're praying for that other person for is already done. Remember what it is that we're trying to do here. We're trying to see and make a distinction between what is true and what is not true. We are trying to see that we have never, ever changed the creation of God. So when I find myself saying, oh, that poor person, and I need to pray for them, I need to pray for God to help them. God, that's a false, hollow prayer. Because God sees them as He created them, as they truly are. It's me that doesn't see that. And so I pray to God. I ask my God self to let me see the truth in them. And then let me share that with them.
So it just was kind of occurring to me when you were saying that what a ripple effect that could have when you start feeling that way about yourself, and that's reflected in someone else, and then it can just go on and on and on.
I must say, that is it. That is what we do. That is what creates this chain reaction, so to speak. That's what connects you with this one that seemed to need all of the help. And that's what connects you with the truth of yourself. We are not trying to change the world. We are trying to change the way we see the world. One morning a couple of days ago, I knew I had some conflicting meditations and my mind was in a turmoil, and Linda and I were sitting having our quiet time. I was anything but quiet. And I said to her, I can't reach brother, I can't reach my God self. My mind is in too much of a turmoil. Help me here and find out about what I need to do to heal this raging bull in my mind. And she just looked at me very calmly and she said, just connect with that part of you that knows you cannot be sick. And there it was. I was trying to solve all of these problems instead of just holding out my hand to the hand of God within my mind that knows I cannot be sick. I cannot feel lack. I can only feel love and peace and joy. That's the simplicity that he's talking about here. And the only reason, dear friends, the only reason we don't do that is because we're still bound and determined to hold on to those remnants of our belief that says we don't deserve it. And that if we falsely reach out for it, we'll be punished even more. I mean, all of this craziness that exists in our consciousness, that has existed in our consciousness for eons. Shall we expect our ego perception to resist all of that? Or shall we just say, no, it's not true? That's what creates the guilt. Yeah.
Where is this tension coming from? Because I always felt sort of like if I looked at what was going on in me, I felt this tension.
It's the same question I asked that we talked about 2 weeks ago when I said, I've been doing this for 30 years and I still feel like there's something missing. And he said, in essence, and I don't want to go back and reread all of the material behind it, but in essence he said, it's not as though there's something missing. It's just that you haven't recognized that there's nothing missing. So what you're dealing with is not a truth. It's not something that is actual. You're dealing with only your perception. That's all. Not a fact. So how would you change your perception that something's missing? How would you change your perception that believes that you have changed the will of God? I don't think any of us would question that there was no lack in God. But by the same token, there are a few of us who would admit that there is anything but lack in us. And what's the difference? Well, just that, belief. Just that. It's called belief. It has nothing to do with facts. I just asked Brother what I should tell Sam, how I should tell Sam that he could experience trust. And I'll tell you what he said to me, Sam. He said, advise you to go to the person you would least trust for anything and ask to see how God created him.
The one I'm least likely to trust is me.
Oh, you.
It has to be that way. Because everything else that seems to be out there, I projected out there.
Well, you just cut out a whole lot.
Listen for just a moment. What Tom says is perfectly true. But if that's not the person that first came to Sam's mind, then Sam should deal with that one.
That's better.
That's why Brother didn't say, take yourself that you trust least, because maybe in Sam's perception there is someone that he at least perceives he trusts less. So that's the one he needs.
Would I be way, way out of line if I were to ask how animals fit into this whole thing that we're talking about? I bring that up because my daughter just lost her dog.
What if you ask yourself, how does a stranger in Somalia fit into this?
I imagine he'd eat my dog.
The point simply is, animals or people will fit in wherever you let them, because it's all a matter of your perception.
But with animals, we can give them unconditional love easier than we can give it to people. Because we don't anticipate any judgment in return.
Bodies aren't real, honey. Bodies are not real. Whether it seems to be the body of a plant, the body of an animal, the body of a person. These are just different ways our perception has of proving its point of separateness and differences. And when we strip away all of our misperceptions, there is nothing but love that is there, anywhere, whether we consider it to be a plant, an animal, or another person. What we're doing is just trying to expose the nature of what love is as being who we are.
Well, it was interesting because when William died, everyone was saying that the bear, his big dog, was grieving. And he would go in and lay on the floor next to William's side of the bed, and he'd just stay there for hours.
Can a dog feel grief? Can you perceive him feeling grief? If so, the answer must be yes. You could change your perception and become aware yourself that there was nothing to grieve for. And then you would have a different opportunity to perceive what you thought the dog was perceiving. Are you beginning to get a feeling for what I'm trying, awkwardly, what I'm trying to say? I think if you could get your mind around the fact that there was no loss.
The only thing that I would hope when I'm gone is that someone will remember me and smile.
Remember you
And smile.
and smile.
That's it,
Will you? If you do, they will, honey. Judith, please take that in.
But
Take that in, what I just said.
Yes.
If you do, they will.
They will.
Because what you're looking for, honey, is how you feel about yourself.
Right.
And a lot of what we're talking about too is level confusion, isn't it? It's
Oh,
like
yes.
what we talked about last week.
Yes.
It can get so mixed up in your mind
Yes.
because you're flopping back and forth kind of all the time.
But
And
the-
level confusion to me, it's either you're looking with your God self or you're looking with the ego self. Is
That's
that
the
correct?
one place, honey, where there is no level confusion.
With the God self, right?
Yes.
But in conversation,
We're always bouncing back and forth.
yeah.
There is nothing we see in this world that we see in truth. But there is nothing in this world that does not truly exist in truth. When Jesus constantly tells us that we can change the meaning of what we see by changing the way we see it, that's what he's trying to tell us. That this so-called truth that we keep constantly seeming to search for and find so elusive is only because we find it elusive only because we are unwilling to accept it just the way it is right now. We insist on trying to accept it the way we see it. And there is no relevance between the two. If you love the character with the knowing, the awareness of what the character is, then that love will be transformed into the reality of the person, being, whatever, that is truly there. Because as he tells us, when love sees, it sees only what is like itself. And so all of the other attributes that we assign to the ego version of the self, simply don't exist. They just fall away in that loving presence.
Nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal.
That's the essence of it, honey. Right there, right there. And that lovely Rumi poem. Out beyond all thoughts of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. What does that say to us? Get past all of the stuff, all of the perceptions, and that's where we meet. When you forgive and love, whatever self you see, your love will show you only what is real about that self. So can you now, any of us, question the power of being in a place of accepting the truth? When we wonder about what it is that we can do, what will help, what will ease pain and suffering, and we question the power of just our willingness to be in that place of accepting what is true. The holy child of God cannot suffer pain, cannot be unhappy, can only experience loving. What he's saying, honey, is that we have made up something that denies the holy child of God. And that something does feel pain. But rather than trying to change that person that does feel pain, it's for us to go past that and to accept that we can find the holy child of God, which is who we really are, and where there is no pain.
The holy child of God can't feel pain. My first thought was, well, then I'm not the holy child of God.
You don't think you're the holy child of God. That's the whole difference. When I went into the prison, and I would say to the guys, here's everything you're going to hear me say, so don't make any mistakes. I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. They all laugh and say, well, then what are we doing here? Which is what you're saying. You're here because you believe there's something wrong with you. And you're experiencing the effects, not of the truth, but of your belief. It's not important whether or not you imagine you have a body. In this moment, it is not important whether you imagine whether or not you have a body, but it is important that you accept the fact that you can be loving. Because the nature of being loving expresses who we are. And we can't know who we are until that we have accepted that loving nature that is who we are.
Like when you feel like you're loving, and most of the time, but that's a different kind of loving than what you're talking about.
It is a different kind of loving, honey. But if that's the kind of loving that you feel or I feel at that moment, then go with it.
Because I'm really having a hard time thinking that I'll ever get to the other loving.
But see, that's why he says, accept the self you see right now. Don't wait until this ego-acceptable being arrives on the scene that the ego says is lovable. This is not going to show up.
Just go with it.
Trust the God self to move you with that intention of loving, moving you to a place that solves all these other issues.
Okay. It will take time.
It doesn't need to take but an instant. Yeah, don't saddle yourself with any restrictions. If it took a year, let it take a year. If it happens, wham, then let it happen that way. Just free your mind. Let your mind be under the control of the God Self. Let that be the only criteria that you're interested in. Go with your commitment to the God Self.
Yeah.
However you may feel about that.
I don't think there's anybody in this room who doesn't see everybody else in this room as loving. The problem is we don't see ourselves that way.
We don't, Brian, but it is enough for a time that we see it for each other.
Yeah, because there's only one anyway. Yeah.
There's a neat exercise you can do. It's kind of fun. Sometime in a meditation, just ask yourself what it is in being different that seems to be important to you. Because those are all the reasons that we use to justify our separateness. So just to ask, what advantage is there to me, does there seem to be to me, in being different? I said, I am so grateful to all of you for doing what you're doing. We are making some shifts that are really, really incredible. Thank you.
How do God's teachers deal with magic thoughts?
I think the easiest way to explain that is simply to say that we are not a body, and therefore anything that we use that would to induce an effect within the body would have to be magic if it were other than our mind that was doing it. In other words, there's nothing about us that is physical.
Yes.
Now, we believe that we're physical,
Right.
and therefore we allow physical things to have a physical effect. But it's the mind that is giving it that ability. And what in the Course, what he calls magic is when we would try to empower things of a physical nature to influence our physical body.
Okay, so that's the drugs and that's the exercise and
Or the natural things, so-called natural things as well.
My understanding of it was that using something within the dream to affect something within the dream.
That's saying, yes, that's pretty much it. Another interesting thing is to see how a placebo will have the same effect. Well, an interesting question is, what would it take for you to recognize that that was true? What would have to happen in your life to help us change our belief that the world was, in fact, just a state of mind and not a physical presence? Linda had an experience very much like that. That's what brought this up. I don't know, would you like to tell them about that?
Which one are you
The
referring to?
garbage experience.
Hatcher walked in the door one day, I think it was when the garbage pickup day, and he said something to the effect that the garbage guys said that they're going to charge you an extra $25 because there's 3 big bags, extra bags, and they don't pick up that kind of debris normally. They don't dispose of that kind of debris. And I didn't think anything of it because I was busy with some other focus. And then later I started thinking about it, and I thought, I didn't put 3 extra bags up there. Somebody must have dumped their garbage up next to our garbage can. I just went on. And that's why I asked, you came over and I said, did you say that? Tom said, no. He said,
Well,
never said anything like that. It was such an interesting experience of being completely into a story I made up completely and was convinced it was true. No idea how I made that story up and made it so real to me.
So when I ask you, what would you accept? as an experience which would help you see that. I'm thinking that we have all had experiences like this. But because we're so set in our belief that the world is happening to us, not because of us, we fail to see these things. And so we think there might be an odd little quirk of something. I think if I had a near-death experience, I probably would have a tendency to pay more attention to that than an experience which would be more like Linda's. But to think what may have happened to you in your life that would help you to accept the fact that you are making up your world.
Yeah.
You literally are making up your world.
As I hear you say that, Tom, I think about how this whole thing is called A Course in Miracles, and how little I am open to receiving miracles, because anything that appears to be something that could be miraculous, my first thought is to go, well, there's probably a reason behind that. There's probably,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And now that's not called miracle readiness in my mind. It's the idea of saying this world is real, so there's an explanation in this world. And I believe that keeps me from experiencing miracles, because I don't really believe in them if that's what I do.
And that's why it's so significantly important for us to understand that we have made up the world.
Yes.
So that consciously, if we would like to change it, we begin to do that. Now, why is that important? So that ultimately we can realize we can let it go. How many of you are doing the lessons as we're going along here? Well, then you've recognized the last couple of days, right? That this world is not the world I want. And the only world that exists is the world of God. What I want to suggest, in order for us to try to become more conscious of what's happening, is to start doing that, and then bring your experiences to the meeting so that we can start talking about them. So that we can literally begin to see the value of, as Tom said, being miracle ready. Because the miracle simply is having a thought that is out of context with the world, but in complete harmony with the thought of God. And then allowing that thought to become the experience of our world. He tells us that we are going to change the world, that we are now in the process of changing the world. But wouldn't it be nice if we could be more consciously a witness to that? And be able then to consciously influence it as well. Would that be a kick? Can we in fact laugh when we turn on the news at night? Is that the thing that would make you appropriately feel most peaceful? No. So there are, I just want to make the point that there are ways that we can deal with it, but in a form that more appropriately would make us more peaceful. For instance, when watching people who are in terrible pain fleeing Syria, it wouldn't seem appropriate to me to laugh.
No.
But it would seem appropriate to me to be able to hold a place of a world in my mind that I recognized we were all going to, so to speak, and know that these people were perfectly capable of being there, just as I am perfectly capable of being there. That feels good. Yes, I've had out-of-body experiences before, yes. And they're very helpful. Very helpful. The one thing that I would have to say about them, however, that is disappointing is that I have never been able to do one on command.
Me neither.
But when they come, they just show up. Now, does that mean that they're happening to me? No. But it means that my mind has to be in a different place than the ego is demanding to have that kind of an experience. I can remember one time in the middle of a conversation with Brother when we were talking about different aspects of the experience of the world. And I just said, well, incidentally, where are you? Thinking that there had to be a place for all of this to be taking place. And he said, well, I don't know, where are you? I said, well, we both must be in a place where we can meet. And he said, yeah, let's stay there. Just feeling that. And I'll be absolutely honest with you and tell you that I felt a little fear that I might have to do that. That I might let go of all the other parts of my world. And I wasn't too sure I was ready to do that. That your thoughts are creating your experience. So, if that experience came up, then that had to mean your thoughts were bringing it up.
But but is that necessary though?
Did it happen?
Yeah.
Well, what did you do? Did you say, is this necessary? Did you ask the question of the God Self, is this necessary?
No. No, I
What
wouldn't.
is this for? How should I see this? Why is this happening? Is it serving any purpose for me to process my fearful thoughts? Or is there something else you would like to have me do with them? You see, honey, the thing that's creating the fear in your mind is that you don't see a resolution. And what we're talking about is the only real resolution there is. That's to find out why you're doing it. Because until you do, it's going to continue to happen. And how many times can you just shut the book? Eventually, you're going to have to answer the question. So, just do it. But do it consciously. It's not something that's happening to you. After a couple of times, truly, after a couple of times, you will see the thing that you're fighting the most is the idea of fear. And the idea of fear only grows in the darkness. So, bring it to the light. If I get caught up in the story and I ask how to see what's happening in the story in a way to free me from the story, that can happen. Because the God Self will take wherever I am as the perfect place to show me the answer to my question.
Because the story is always a lesson?
Not necessarily, but it's always there. If it's there, it's there for a reason. I've given it a reason at least. And so I can be shown what that reason is. You know, the thing that used to trouble me the worst, 25, 30 years ago, when I would suffer bouts of depression, and I would awaken in the morning, but I was afraid the night before that when I was going to awaken in the morning, I would awaken to these thoughts of fear. So I was allowing fear to set the stage and then absolutely demonstrating to myself that's what was going to happen. And it wasn't until I could see that those thoughts of fear were going to serve whatever purpose I gave them, whatever purpose I gave them, that I began to lose my fear of my thoughts of fear.
$200, that's what he wanted. So when I went out, I said, $200 is quite a bit. I did a lot of your work with you. I mean, I worked there with him, you know.
And I said, that's what you're going to charge me? And he said, yes. And I said, boy, as a nurse, I didn't make that much money. Anyway, I started telling him, talking to him, and he said, finally, he says, well, what if I come over and if I spray all of the gravel and everything to keep the weeds down and all this kind of a thing? And I said, that would be very nice. I'd appreciate that. But I stood up for myself. I mean, I'm not used to doing that, you know?
Did you ask before, Eddie?
Ask the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Where is this thought of lack coming from? And what will be the best way for me to cope with it? Should I try to get a better deal? What should I do?
Well, I thought I did pretty good.
Only in terms of the better deal. And that's the ego's gratification.
But I gave him the money. That was okay. I understand, okay. But I felt very good about it. I thought I did good. I stood up for myself. Okay.
Whatever is meaningful to you, honey, will be used by the God Self perfectly, if only we remember to ask. And that's the only important thing, is not to allow ourselves to get into a pattern of thinking we know what's best for us, because we don't. I look back on my life and I say, you know, if it were my thoughts that created all of this, boy, I can sure tell which ones I wish I had turned over. And then I look back on the ones that I did turn over, and I just see so many beautiful things happening. Just night and day. So I don't have any trouble being encouraged to ask what I should be and what I should not be engaging in. And I also don't prejudge which of the things that I ask about are going to help me the most. Because it's usually the ones that I think are pretty mundane that turn out to be the bigger whoa.
Can you give an example of something for you?
That I ask about?
Mm-hmm.
Goodness. Yesterday morning, I had just begun my meditation, and a thought came into my mind of a young man that I've been doing some work with, because he's going through what could be a nervous breakdown with his work. And my inclination was to put that was a thought that was going to interrupt my meditation, so to put it out of my mind. And I did that, tried to do that 2 or 3 times, and it just kept coming back to my mind. And so finally I stopped and I asked, you know, how should I be seeing this, and what should I be doing? And Brother said simply, it's not yet time for the meditation. Mark's going to call this young man. And within a minute he did. So listening, asking and listening put me in a better frame of mind for being able to be helpful than sitting there thinking, oh Lord, here's another interruption for my meditation. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of judging the moment and saying, I know what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interruption. No, this was a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't have said that until after I had asked.
Or it could have also been to almost put myself down for
Yes.
allowing these thoughts.
Yes. And that's always the first reaction of the ego. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
The ego's main function is to make us feel bad. I mean, we have to give it credit for doing a good job. And I mean that sincerely, because...
Well, I see that now. For me.
Well, but I mean, even giving it credit for doing a good job keeps me from judging myself.
Yeah.
I remember
And,
one time,
yeah, so-
brother saying to me, he said, I want to give you an illustration of something.
Yeah.
He said, pick a neutral thought in your mind.
Yeah.
Thoughts kept coming and going, coming and going, and I don't have any neutral thoughts. Finally, the only conclusion I could come to, I don't have any neutral thoughts.
Yeah.
He said, why do you think that is? Just for what you were saying, Sam. Because all those thoughts were flowing through my perception, which was programmed only to reflect back to me how I saw myself. That's the only function our perception does. It's a mechanism to mirror back to us how we feel about ourselves. So, what Brother's point was, now, you are familiar enough with my mind saying to me, and yes, be with my mind and allow those same thoughts to flow through. And it was amazing. They were all happy. They were all, as you would have put it, positive. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, my God, that means that the thought doesn't have. Takes me a while, folks. Thoughts don't have an automatic outcome. It doesn't happen until I give it one. What does that mean? That means that I can take any thought that has ever flowed through my mind and give it any outcome that I choose. Is that an amazing fact or what? Any thought that has ever been in my mind, I can give it the meaning that will give it the outcome that I choose for it right from the beginning. And
So does that mean you can get a good outcome from a bad thought?
Absolutely. What determines the outcome of our thoughts, Raj?
How rotten they are.
A what?
How rotten they are.
No, that's just the meaning we've given them. If you will think back, you will notice that on many occasions throughout the course, Brother says, see this differently. He doesn't say change it, do it differently. He just says see it differently. What
Which
is
is changing the thought.
It's changing the meaning we give the thought.
Without changing the thought.
You don't have to change the thought. Change the meaning you give it.
So what's coming to me is every thought is, or every situation is an opportunity to love. And,
Brian, I hope that's the conclusion I'm coming to.
Yeah.
That's the only one that makes any sense to me.
I like that quote from the Course that says, no matter what the question, love is the answer.
Yes, that's Linda's favorite as well.
Yeah.
You know, why did he being Brother, why did he give us, back on March the 30th, why did he give us the thought of learning to forgive and love ourselves just the way we see ourselves right now?
You have to start where you are.
You have to begin right there.
Yeah.
You have to find that that's the place where your love really is. You can't program it out down somewhere, down the road, and expect it to have any meaning for you. See, right where I am right now is where love is, because that's where I am.
I recall sometime in the recent past approaching our negative thoughts by realizing they are not real. These are not my real thoughts.
Yes. Yes. None of them are. Left to their own accord, none of them are.
Yeah.
In fact, it was just in one of the recent lessons where Brother said, all of your thoughts are born of fear. All of your thoughts that come from a perception of separateness are based upon fear. Not some of them.
So it seems logical that the next step would be to, if they're not real, to let them go, but that would be trying to bypass the Holy Spirit, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Solving that.
Well, you can ask the Holy Spirit about letting it go. Or if you're the kind of person whose mind needs something to chew on, then you ask how to see it differently. And you give it a different meaning, and you just process the thought from a different perspective. Just what Brian was saying. Once I learn to see a loving self, just begin to get the slightest inclination of a loving self. Now my thoughts have a different media through which they can be processed. What does the God self do for us? What is the function of the Holy Spirit?
Forgiveness.
Before that, it is to hold in mind a vision, so-called, an awareness of what is true. In other words, what is loving. So when I go to the God self or the Holy Spirit and I say, show me how to see this differently, what I'm asking is, how do I see this in a loving way? And is there a way to see everything in a loving way? Yes, there is. Do you know why? Because the things we are asking to see differently aren't real. That's why when I see or when I have the vision of these people who are suffering so, I say, my goodness, how can I possibly see that differently? Well, if I see what is real for them, I am seeing it entirely differently. God's thoughts do not make misery or fear, but mine do. What comes up for you when you come into this place we are right now? What begins to come up for you? Anyone? Do you begin to think maybe of different possibilities than what you normally think? You maybe consider how real, how actually real it can be to have a loving thought, where before you really hadn't seen the possibility. We are at a place of being able to accept that we can change everything that exists in our experience by seeing it from a loving perspective, and we need to do that because that is the way God sees it.
Brings to mind the words of Jesus, I have overcome the world.
What else could that mean, Sam? What else?
It's such a completely transformative idea. I mean, it's kind of like everything changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you say it, Sam. Now you say it. Not from his perspective, but from yours.
I can overcome the world.
And have. That's for each of us. That's where we're going.
And bring a feeling of lightness.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of that heavy, guilty, crummy, dumb. The only thing I would add perhaps to what you said, Brian, and it's so vital that we all come to the awareness of what love is. the function that love performs. It even goes farther than wanting to join. Love sees only what it is joined with, and there is nothing that it is not joined with.
It doesn't see the separation.
No, because love can't be divided.
And like we were joined together for the rest of the walk.
Wasted 3/4 of the walk.
But I didn't say, God, self, this is the situation, you direct me. And if I would have done that, we probably would have walked together earlier.
You would have found what it was that was the true communication between the two of you.
What do you mean?
Simply ask, what should I do here? How should I see this? What's here for me? Am I missing something?
It's a great example of how the same words mean different things to different people. The filters you were talking about.
Yeah. There's another fun exercise to do. Take somebody that you are tinkering with the idea of loving them. And go into a place, nice, warm, livable place in your meditation, and ask the God Self to show you how to love them. And then do the step 2, which is then try to separate from them. And what you'll find is that you can't. When you are with somebody in a state of loving them, there is no way to feel separate from them. But it's a very neat way to illustrate to yourself how love joins. Love just gloms on to whatever it sees. And to me, that's always been so vitally important, because I wonder, it obviously it'll make you wonder why you don't just do that with everybody.